Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Food School Smarter, Stronger, Leaner podcast on a mission to inspire a world where food makes us better. Today, guys, you are tuning in. You are a fly on the wall in the room where we're having conversation with one Norwegian restless author, TED speaker, journalist, podcast host, and the first person to visit every country twice, and who also holds a lot of other travel records. We are talking today with Gunnar Garfors again, the man who traveled to every country twice. And you're going to hear about, of course, all the food travel experiences, about the weirdest and the most bizarre foods that Gunnar had while traveling. You're also gonna hear about the most sickening experiences and the least delicious experiences that Gunnar had. But also, guys, you're gonna learn about some food realities that we in Western world take for granted. Like, we think that's how it's everywhere. That's how food system works everywhere. But in fact, for most of the people outside of the Western world, it's not the case. So we are privileged in that way. We're also privileged because our education, our ability to learn, to read, to understand things in our confusing food world, we are able to make better for us eating choices. In a lot of countries, it's just not the case. It's hard to make better for your choices when you don't understand what is better for your choices, right? And of course, we're going to talk about the healthiest food cultures, food traditions around the world, and what unites those cultures. And also, we'll chat about how our food cultures, traditions reflect our human values. Well, without further ado, I'm not gonna hold from you any longer our fascinating conversation with Gunnar Garfors. So tune in, stay tuned, and learn about food cultures and traditions around the world. Again, without the man who traveled to every country twice, Gunnar Garfors.
Brilliant.
Yeah. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm still at work, but I found a meeting room for a talk. So and summer is coming, so everything's good here. And how about you, Angela?
Oh, it's amazing. I did this short trip to Yalta and I didn't quite like it, so I just came back.
Okay. Well, it was that bad, was it?
It was like Soviet Union that I didn't expect it was that bad because, until 6 years ago, it was part of Ukraine, and then Russia got it, I don't know, back or whatever. And now it's kind of still in between and mostly in the past. So it's really weird.
No. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Well, so it's gone back to the Soviet Union in many ways, or at least looks like it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So how's Norway? How's everything like with this situation with coronavirus and?
No, it's quite good actually, because we've been lucky. We let's say we closed down relatively early, so the number of cases has not been too high. I think 240 people died, which is not too bad considering the average age of the people who died were 82. So now we have almost no cases, and restaurants have reopened, and so have bars and all the rest of it. So it's almost back to normal, except for travel.
So are you allowed to travel inside or outside the country? Like, what does it look like?
We can travel within Norway, yes, without many restrictions. We have to wear a face mask if we fly. And other than that, we can travel to Finland and Iceland and Denmark. And that's it, without restrictions. Otherwise, we have to, if we travel elsewhere, we have to go into quarantine for 10 days, I think, upon return. So, no, it's not too bad. But, of course, there are not many flights flying anyway from Norway.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's everywhere. I'm not sure we're flying anywhere from Russia right now. Maybe Turkey, but I'm not sure. But
Okay.
yeah, you also have to be in quarantine once you get anywhere.
Yeah.
So
no, quite inconvenient, but oh well.
Yeah, it will pass.
It will.
Yeah. Gunnar Garfors. So welcome to Food School Podcast, and thank you for joining us today. You are the man who traveled to every country twice.
Well, someone has to do it, I guess. Angela, thanks a lot for having me. It's something after I started traveling, it just sort of, I got hooked on the experiences, seeing new places and old places around the world. So I just kept on traveling, and I never stopped. Well, until Corona came along. So in 2020, I've only been in Norway, where I live, and to Sweden for a short trip.
Still some traveling.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. So our listeners at this moment probably are wondering, what do you do besides traveling? Is it your full-time thing or not? For people who don't know anything about you, what do you do besides traveling to all these countries?
Well, I have a normal job, believe it or not. So originally, I'm a journalist. I now work for a Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation. I no longer work as a journalist, though. I'm working with, right now, IT projects, which sounds quite boring, I guess, to a lot of people. But in the meantime, and also, I'm also writing books, travel books. I'm doing quite a few presentations in Norway and in the rest of the world, usually having to do with either media in which I work, as I said, or about travels. So so I'm trying to balance things. So you can say I have different things to do, different jobs. I'm going to take some time off from work as soon as this Corona pandemic hopefully comes to a halt, and travel for full time for 15 months.
For 15 months?
Yeah. So I was supposed to do this starting in October, November this year, but maybe I have to postpone. We will see.
What's the plan? Is it a secret or not?
No, the plan is, it's not a secret. The plan is to travel around the world in 10, 12 different countries to meet people. Some just random people I meet on the road. Other people I'm sort of planning to organize meetings with in advance, and to talk to them about their countries, about what they're doing, how things are, their cultures, and all the rest of it. So I've written one book like that. It came out last year. About the world's least visited countries in the world, the 20 countries in the world that receive the fewest tourists. And it's sort of a similar book, but this time I'm traveling around the world, sort of in the tropics, and we'll focus on a different set of countries.
Oh, what kind of countries?
Well, tropical countries. I'm going to go visit some countries in Africa, some countries in South America, some countries in Asia. So we will see exactly which countries I'll sort of pick. Some of them will be, more famous than others to most people. So it's sort of about visiting countries that are, let's say, more of a mystery to most readers, whereas others are more we're more familiar with, thanks to television series and books and news media in general.
You travel to so many different, exotic countries that many people never been to, and you probably eat there too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think that's an integral and very important part of traveling to me, to try food in different countries, in different cities, different regions, and preferably eat with people who actually live there and who can take me to either to cook, or to take me to restaurants which they actually know are good and that represent the local cuisine. So I love trying different kinds of food in wherever I go. Of course, sometimes you're unlucky and you catch, you're food poisoned and you'll have to face the consequences. But usually it's not really a problem.
During all these, travels and food experiences, what would you say was like the weirdest food experience or food you tried? Anything comes to mind?
Well, there's a few different things. Probably worms, earthworms in South Africa were probably the strangest tasting things I've ever tried. Black, quite thick worms. They were fried. Still didn't taste really good, but they came with some sort of a hot sauce. So if I dipped the worms in the hot sauce, it was a little bit, it was slightly better. And then in South Korea, I ate live octopuses. So they were still alive when I swallowed them. Apparently, it's some specialty in Korea, and a few people every year they die from the experience because the octopuses don't want to be eaten, so they sort of cling to the throat, and the eaters they suffocate. So then in Norway we have the head of sheep, which looks quite disgusting because it's actually the skull of a sheep and the meat around it. So those three things are among the most bizarre things I've probably eaten.
And they all sound very weird and unusual indeed. Do they taste good? Like, is it something
the
you'd like
worms,
to eat?
not so much, I would say. And I've tried them twice because I was going to give them a second chance, so to speak. The octopus was better for sure, and the sheep is quite good actually. It's very tender meat. I don't think you're a meat eater yourself, Angela, but they're.
I am though.
Oh, you are. Oh,
I am. Things
totally
change.
mistake. But if you like tender lamb, it's one of the most tender parts of the sheep. The sort of the cheeks of the sheep. Some people eat the eye of the lamb or the sheep as well. That's quite disgusting actually, but again I had to try it.
Well, those were the weirdest foods. What were some of your best food experiences? Something really memorable?
Well, I'm really fond of seafood, and I've eaten incredible foods in Japan. Of course, they're very good and and they have a long tradition for seafood. I've been to the Tokyo seafood market, which has unfortunately been moved to a much more modern facility. But the old one was really special, and people were obviously, as they do in fish markets or seafood markets, they were cutting up huge tunas, and I don't know, they were creating all these magical experiences from super fresh seafood. I've been to some incredible restaurants as well. Some of them have been sort of local, unknown restaurants. Others have been world famous Michelin star restaurants. I think Noma in Denmark, in Copenhagen, it's probably, it's very high up on the list of incredible food experiences. Yeah, they showed us around the restaurants, and there were I don't know, must have been like 30 or 40 chefs working around on the first floor, and it was just unreal how much attention they were putting into the food they were preparing. So I really enjoy spending money on food when I travel. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be posh at all. But it's more about the what people who make it, what they put into it. You can tell they're proud from making all these dishes, and I really want you as a foreigner or as a visitor to have the best possible food experiences, and all the stories that come from eating in restaurants. I just love that aspect of eating my way around the world, so to speak.
So I hear that you love spending, money on good food experiences, but I meant more like what kinds of food specifically, like maybe some dishes or maybe, some specific food items, like you said about worms or octopus. Maybe it's something, from that kind of like category, but something that you love, something that you
of course, there are many examples. Maybe one of my absolute favorites are oysters. So if I see oysters on the menu, I have to try oysters. I will, as you know, oysters can be really bad for your tummy if they're not fresh. So typically I order just 2 or 3 oysters to check the quality of them. And if they're good, I go overboard and order 12 or 24 or whatever. Just recently, just this weekend, I visited a friend of mine, and he lives in southern part of, or he has a cabin in the southern part of Norway. And we actually went out down on the beach, and we picked 40 oysters ourselves, and then had a feast afterwards, eating them. So oysters is one of my absolute favorites. So wherever I am, not wherever I am, but especially along the coasts of the world. And of course, oysters, I prefer oysters that are from relatively cold water. And we see even here in southern parts of Norway, oysters are now appearing. We didn't used to have oysters here, or not much anyway, but there is this Pacific oyster that's sort of spreading around the world, and that's even made its way up here. I don't know, other kinds of food. This is not a very popular food dish, I should say. In most countries in the world, it's forbidden in quite a few places. But in Norway, we have a long tradition for whaling and eating whale meat. And it's extremely good taste. It's very easy to destroy, because if you cook it too long, if you put it in fry it in pan too long, it starts tasting like fish oil, and that's not the taste you would like to have. So you really need to be very fast in the pan, maybe only, 15, 20, 30 seconds on each side. And it's so tender, it's so healthy, and it's so good. So in many ways, it tastes like steak, but it's much more healthy. And I think the only places you can get to this is probably Norway and Japan, possibly New Zealand and parts of Alaska. I think those are the only countries that actually, and Iceland as well, not to forget our neighbor to the west. But yeah, that's another dish that really I really love, and that fascinates me.
Anything else comes to mind?
Oh, well, I can keep talking all day about various kinds of food. I was in Vietnam with a colleague and a friend a few years ago, and we asked to try a king cobra, the snake. And they took us to what they call the Snake City, which is just north of Hanoi, the capital in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And we sat down, and they gave us some drinks, and they asked us, what would you like? Well, of course, we are here for the snake, the famous snake. And it took us out in the backyard, and there you had this guy inside a big cage with loads of snakes, and he held up like 2. One in each hand, and any of these? Would you like any of these, or which one would you like? He was so bored. While we were discussing which one we were going to get, we picked one of them, king cobra, and the chefs. After we picked it, and it was still alive, and we went back to our table, and within I think only 12 or 15 minutes, we got the first dish to our table, and out of this snake, 2 grown-up men, we did not manage to eat it all. I think it was 2 meters long, 2.5. And they made it into 9 or 10 different dishes. It was snake, king cobra snake soup. It was snake spring rolls. It was some sort of, that looked like almost sushi, but only from the snake. That was magic in the making. They made so many different kinds of dishes from this one that seemed quite small snake, and it turned out to be a lot of it. And then in the end, we also we were given the heart, because it's only got one heart, mm-hmm. and it's quite small. So then my colleague, who is much older than me, according to Vietnamese tradition, the oldest person in the room will get the heart. So he got the heart, made into a drink with some vodka. And judging by the look on his face, I think I was lucky not being the oldest person in the room. He was not a big fan of that, let's say, snake drink or whatever that was.
Yeah, I'm curious as a nutritionist, what were some nutrients in that dish, the whole thing, the cobra and the heart and everything?
Oh yes, no, that's I don't know. I haven't really looked into that, but I can tell you there was lots of bones in the snake. So yeah, we spend a bit of time removing bones from some of the dishes as well.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of different whole foods, and that was really like great for me to hear. Especially things like oysters. They're actually one of the most nutritious foods on the planet. So
Really, wow.
Yeah.
So I'm actually healthy when I'm eating oysters.
And all these, exotic whole foods like worms also are really nutritious. Whale meat also very nutritious. But yeah, oysters like full of zinc and a lot of minerals, especially now for COVID-19. It's actually one of the superfoods that probably will protect you really well from a lot of things that might happen to your immune system. So keep eating.
Oh, that's very good to hear. Because after, I had we picked these 40 oysters on Saturday, no, on Friday, and then on Saturday it was so good. So then I went to a restaurant and ordered 24 new oysters. So I've had a lot of oysters lately. So that's good to hear. It's healthy.
Yeah, it's really healthy, amazing. So keep eating them. What were, I am curious about the most experiences. What were some of the most, I don't know if you had them, like some awful food experiences, when you like put something in your mouth or when you see it and you just want to throw it up or go get away from it?
Well, in large parts of Africa, they eat insects, and I mean you have a lot of protein in insects, and we have an explosion when it comes to the number of people on this planet. So I think a lot of us will have to eat insects in the future. But when it comes to cockroaches, I'm not a huge fan. So they had sort of fried them into, let's say, chips or whatever, or crisps. So, but just knowing that you're now eating cockroaches, that was, that was a little bit odd and not very, very appealing to me. So that sort of managed to eat it, but I sort of felt quite bad in my tummy afterwards, even though there shouldn't really be any reason for that. I believe. Also, I think I don't know if this statistics is accurate, but I've heard that 70% of all tourists visiting India will be food poisoned. And I've been to India quite a few times, and this was the first time in India, and I got severe food poisoning. And I just noticed when I was eating, I was there with my ex-girlfriend at the time, and both of us, we were in a restaurant that looked quite decent, but they don't have toilet paper in large parts of India, so they use their left hand instead.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if you don't wash your hands afterwards and you are the chef, then needless to say, your guests will be in trouble. And we could sort of feel that already, probably only 10 minutes after eating, that this was bad, both of us. And another half an hour, 35 minutes, and she was puking, and another 15 minutes later, I was puking. And by the time we were puking, we were on a train that was going to take us from Mumbai on the west coast and further down the coast to Goa. A train that should take 8 or 9 hours, but there was a train crash ahead of us, so the journey ended up taking 20 hours. And I was on the toilet on the train, and it was coming out both ways at the same time. I really thought I was going to die. That was the worst experience ever. And I've had food poisoning a few times, but that was by far the worst food poisoning ever.
Yeah, it just I guess it makes me think again about all these bacteria, viruses and small microorganisms that we usually don't think about unless they cause us troubles like coronavirus or like food poisoning, But they can, make our life really miserable.
They can really screw things up for sure. And this was some nasty chicken curry or something. It should have been a nice chicken curry, but turned out anything but. Nasty surprise indeed.
Anything else comes to mind? Awful, disgusting.
Well, awful food. I would say if you go to Ecuador or Peru, you have guinea pigs that are being served as a delicacy, and they raise them, just for they farm them, or they for food, and this is really a delicacy, and it's quite expensive. So my mom, she's now retired, but she used to be a teacher. So she took a lot of her students to Ecuador as part of one of the courses in school. And, so she showed them these farms, the students, and they spoke to the farmer and so on and so forth. And some of the kids, when they were later served these cute animals, some of them refused to eat them and they cried and all the rest of it. I didn't travel there with my mom, but I think it's a good training to actually, when you travel, to almost be forced to eat what they eat locally. They've taken, it was served half a guinea pig, and it was cut in half, so the head was cut in two. And so you could sort of see the teeth. It was sort of like this little creature looking at you with one eye. And it turned out it didn't look too bad. It looked like grilled or barbecued chicken in many ways. But that was not one of my favorites either. My mom has later told me, no, she really likes it. So maybe I wasn't lucky. I was being served some not so good guinea pig, but it didn't really tempt me to try it again. In the same countries, Peru and Ecuador and China, you can also actually order cat food. No, not cat food. Cat as food. Cat meat as food. And they have this festival. I believe it's in the southern parts of Peru, where, they used to have a cat meat festival once a year. When the Western media got hold of this, the uproar, and people said, "Oh, you can't eat cat," and all the rest of it. So they sort of made it much smaller, and now it's more like an unofficial festival. I still haven't tried cat meat. I mean, my sisters would kill me if they heard me eating a cat. They've had like loads of cats throughout their time, and so that's something I haven't eaten. Dog, on the other hand, I've tried again in China. That was in a South Korean restaurant, and this relationship a lot of us have with dogs. I never had a dog in my family. My mom was allergic, so to me, I never really had this close relationship to dogs as an animal. So I said, well, why not? I'll try it. And but yeah, there's no faces. No, you can see the faces of the dog or anything. And I must say, it was really, really delicious. It was really good meat, very, very tender. It was served as part of a soup, the dish I had in China. So that was. It doesn't sound too good to a lot of people, but actually, it was delicious, in my opinion.
Yeah, for me, I don't know. I can't imagine myself eating dog, but then again, when I think about it a little bit deeper, like what's the difference between a dog and a cow or a pig or a fish? Just because we look at them and they're our pets, and we, have closer relationship with us, that makes it a little bit more difficult, I guess.
Yeah. And of course, you can say the same. It all depends on where you are. In Norway, we eat reindeer, we eat moose or elk, or we eat deer. In Africa, they eat zebra, antelope. I've tried all of these things. Alligator and crocodile is quite interesting, actually. It's sort of a mix between fish and meat. It looks almost like chicken, very almost fish even. It's quite light meat, and it tastes let's say different. But it fascinates me that, and you mentioned whether it's a dog or a cow, it shouldn't really matter. People eat whatever they have around them and whatever nature provides. So I don't really see anything wrong with eating any sort of animals. I still haven't eaten cat, as I said, and maybe I'll refrain from that, or at least I won't tell my sisters.
Or you could tell, they forced you to eat it.
Oh, exactly. Yes, that's a good story.
We started to speak a little bit about food traditions, and in a lot of parts of the world, they eat certain foods, not because, they want exotic foods, but because that's what's available, right? If the easiest meat to catch is alligator, then that's what you're going to eat. And I'm curious, while traveling in all these different countries, what, if anything, did you notice that was quite different from what we are all used to right now in our Western civilization, with supermarkets and, stores? Like, you've been to all these countries, like, what are, I don't know, maybe some major like differences you noticed somewhere?
Well, I think it has to do with the availability of electricity and the power of money, or having enough money to buy a fridge, or the combination of those two. So in large parts, again, in Africa and especially Southeast Asia, and also on some specific Pacific islands, you can't really keep things refrigerated. So which means stuff like rice or pasta will stay a long time. So you get a lot of that. And I was in Kiribati, one of the countries in the Pacific, and it was rice every single day. And, it's sort of, you just get tired of it. I mean, you have different vegetables, you have different meats, whatever, different sauces perhaps, but it's a little bit too much of the same. Kiribati, it's an island nation, it consists only of islands. And still, they did not eat fish there at all. So much sea around, which really surprised me. And I was, I was stuck there for some time because of some planes that didn't leave, that were, they were being repaired and cancelled. So I really made me totally fed up with rice. That was pretty much the staple to, they served everything with, whether it was breakfast or lunch or dinner. Same in again, large parts of Africa. You certainly have a lot of rice. You have breadfruit, or whichever similar staple food they can get their hands on. And the tendency is that they eat it all the time, which means that you tend to get a little bit tired of that. At the same time, that's what they have, and they don't have the fridges, so they don't have too much of an option, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Fridges or electricity, and there you tend to be served the same kind of staple dish to all meals, whether it's breakfast or lunch or dinner. And it can be rice, it can be breadfruit, it can be any other similar kinds of fruit. And now I can't remember all the names of the different fruits or vegetables that they use for this purpose. But you have quite a lot of them in Africa, and they're quite similar. They're sort of potato-ish, or they're based on corn or similar. That will sort of fill you up, but doesn't necessarily taste too much. Mm-hmm. So I think sauces are quite essential, and a lot of these are being spiced up using hot sauces or similar that will also stay for a long time without being refrigerated. So various kinds of chili are, you can find these types all around the world in order to make whatever you're eating taste a little bit more than maybe it would otherwise do.
So basically, I guess it's different because a lot of foods are available to them, but they're not able to use all of them that efficiently because of that, right? Because of that technology, all the lack of technology like refrigeration or electricity or other things.
Yeah, no, that's true. And also it has a lot to do with infrastructure. Large parts of Africa, you almost have no roads. You still transport stuff on rivers or maybe you have to carry it on your backs and so on. So and people live in small villages, perhaps. Some people, of course, live in big cities where they have more choice when it comes to food, but often it's quite expensive. So it's all, yes, it's something to do about electricity, availability of money or being able to afford having a fridge, for instance, or having electricity to your house, but also the availability in your village. If it's a small village, you might have to grow most of what you eat yourself. Maybe you're lucky to catch some fish in the local river. But we take all these things for granted. We have all kinds of food flown in from the other side of the world, wherever we are. Here, they don't even have a road, and for sure not an airport. Or a port. So it really shows how lucky we are in the Western world. We have all the infrastructure. We have the money to pay for this. It's quite an unfair world out there. And if you talk about traveling, most people will never even leave their country. They will never travel outside their country. They don't have the money. They don't have the passport, and so on and so forth. They might not even have a road. They have to walk for days and days in order to get to a road that will take them to an airport. And of course, they can never afford to buy a plane ticket or hitch a ride with a boat. So it's an interesting question. We're focusing on food here, but it sort of points to a much bigger issue, which deals with the transport of food. The possibility to buy different kinds of food. Infrastructure is certainly at the heart of this here.
That's why I'm actually most passionate about food and food system and changing it. Not sure exactly how, but I want to reshape it, because food actually connects us all. We all eat many times a day, and we can't escape it. And the way we grow, produce, the way we distribute food, it actually reflects all of our values as society, and how we treat each other, how we care about the world, and how long-term or short-term thinking creatures we are. So it's not just what's on our plate. That's why I'm passionate about it. And did you, what I'm always curious about, traveling to all these countries, like, do they, as they say, like in most remote places, have like Coca-Cola or other like junk food brands available everywhere, and people just treating it like food?
Well, more or less. The exception there for Coca-Cola is North Korea. So there you have other brands of cola. You can get sort of contraband or smuggled Coke even in North Korea, but officially you won't have it. The same with beer when it comes to Heineken, which is, I think in their ads, they say available in 192 countries. So I'm not quite sure how they calculate the countries. There are 198 countries in the world, but I only think, even in North Korea they have Heineken. So maybe the Vatican. Then again, even there they have beer, but maybe not Heineken. So they're apparently missing very very few countries. It's good questions, and again, it has to do with where you are. If you are in a town, even in most villages or cities, for sure you can get a lot of stuff you're familiar with, and especially these world famous brands such as Coke. Then again, in some parts of the world, Pepsi is much more famous than Coca-Cola, and in Norway, for sure, in most of Europe, Coca-Cola is more famous, even though everybody knows about Pepsi. So you have these little differences when you travel, and you just take for granted that this brand is world famous. And I said, no, well, it might be famous in your home country or your part of the world, but it doesn't mean it's famous in every country. So, that's interesting as well, for sure.
But I was also actually curious about. In different parts of the world, they have their own unique like food culture, right? And a lot of what I read is about how these brands, they invade those cultures, and now people, instead of eating what's available locally, what's like nutritious and good for you, they start eating, and spending whatever money they have on this junk, basically. And with that comes like a lot of health problems or malnutrition related stuff.
No, that's true, and you see a lot of what you call was it half produce, or you have these bags like Nestle or these huge companies that produce like soups or whatever, just add water or any other kinds of dinners, and the way they serve them or distribute them, of course, in order to distribute these very far away, they need to be able you need to be able to store this food for a long time, so it's all dried up. And in order to get any taste out of them, there's a lot of salt in there. As you say, the nutritional value might not be good at all. You have the what do you call it? The milk, mother's milk. The substitute of breast milk to babies. You know, lots of these companies, they've been trying to market this heavily as say, no, this is much more healthy than breast milk, which is a total lie, you know. And then you have babies that are being served this, and they spend a lot of money on this awful substitute instead of giving them the most healthy thing a baby can get. And of course, this is also valid for children, older children, and for adults. You know, they're often these people have no education or very little education. If you're lucky, they can read a little bit. If not, at least they will still understand ads and big posters with happy people, you know, eating this or that brand, you know. So no, I think when everything, you know, when all comes to all, it's all a matter of education, you know, knowing what is good for you, and knowing that yes, you should make your own food. You shouldn't go for all these bags or, you know, half-produced dinners or whatever. They will never be as you know, highly processed foods. You know, processed food is not going. You know much more about this than I do, but you know. But if you don't know better, you know, if you have no education, you're never given the possibility of having an education, then how can you know? And this is, big companies are taking advantage of this, and you end up seeing a lot of people, you know, malnourished as a result.
Yeah. Do you think, like, what was your impression? Do we have better diet right now in Western world, or do other countries with less like civilization and less, I don't know, availability of different food products have it better? Like, what's your impression?
That's a good question. At least we have more of a choice. We have the availability. We have the education, or we should have the education. At the same time, you see the obesity rates in the Western world are skyrocketing. So I think it's split in two in many Western countries. You have some very healthy people in most Western countries, and then under the underdeveloped world, you know, if you have access, if you're a farmer or, you know, fisherman, you have access to some food, you can be very quite healthy. You know, the poorest people will not have access to this. But let's say the middle class, the lower middle class in developing world can be quite healthy. Again, unless they have seen all the ads for the fantastic food, and you know, they end up buying that instead. So you can't say no because you have an education and you have access to all sorts of food, you are more healthy, or you're not more healthy. But I think there is at least we have more of a choice in many of the more developing countries than in poorer parts of the world.
Yeah, and do you like? Was it your impression? Is it true? Like, I read a lot about malnutrition problems in the developing world, like that most of the people actually have hard times getting enough good food, whereas in our world it's more a problem of just, you know, the wrong choice that you make, even though everything is available.
Yeah. And here, you know, I don't know the statistics, but I think we throw away almost half, or I think it's 40 or 45% of all food we throw away. You know, perfectly good food, I know we just have so much of it, and we buy too much, and then we never have time to eat it, and then it goes off. Or we buy it and then we forget we have it, and then it's the back of your fridge or in your cabinet or closet. You know, so it's Well, it's very, very clearly a very uneven world. You know, a lot of us we can afford it. We buy whatever we have access, and we might still end up just eating junk or eating in much worse food than we could. Much less healthy food than we actually even have in our fridges or in our kitchens. So no, there's a big divide, and again, it has to do, in my opinion, with education, and of course with availability of food, and it has to do with poverty as well. So there are for sure several factors here, but you can't pinpoint on one thing alone that's to blame. I don't think.
Yeah, me neither. What do you think? What was your impression? Maybe something that was, something you remembered from all these travels, like some of the healthiest food cultures in the places you visited. Like anything that comes to mind?
Oh, that's a tricky question. I mean, again, I think you have a lot of really healthy seafood, and again, if we combine that with vegetables, salads, and so on, you will stay very, very healthy. And parts of Asia, or large parts of Asia, Vietnam, you have a very healthy diet. In Korea, South Korea, you have a lot of fantastic food and very healthy. But again, we're seeing that the Western brands are, taking over or trying to lure people into a simpler, and less good options. Also here in Norway, we have lots of availability, and if you go for it, and if you go to the good food markets, which you'll find in most Western countries, you can really find good dishes and very healthy dishes. I don't know if one country stands out as better or worse than in any other. But you can see that in some countries that don't have a coast, for instance, then, of course, they might have rivers or lakes, so they might still have fish. But in many of these, it's more widespread to eat meat, maybe more fatty dishes. In some cold countries, you have more fatty dishes because in earlier times you needed fat in order not to freeze to death. And now we have heaters. And we have houses that and cars and everything. So and we might still stick to the same foods, even though we don't need that kind of all that fat. And then we go obese as a result of it. But I'd say as a general rule of thumb, let's say fish or countries with a lot of seafood tend to be healthier. Also, if you look at olive oil around the Mediterranean Sea and elsewhere, where they eat a lot of olive oil or olives, they tend to live a lot longer than elsewhere. These also are nearby the sea naturally, so you have a lot of good stuff there. Middle Eastern cuisines are also very, very healthy. You have the mezze, or the tapas-ish kind of dishes, small dishes. Then you get some fish, you get some meat, you get a lot of vegetables, and you have a lot of oils, healthy olive oils. So those are also healthy. But I think you have studied this much better than I have, Angela. So I think you can probably answer the question better.
Yeah. But I haven't been to so many places. That's why I invited you to this podcast, to learn more about the world and how it's done. I'm also curious about actually food culture. Like in Western world, a lot of us, we are losing this. We're eating while doing something on the go, by ourselves. Sometimes, I see people crossing the street and eating something,
Yeah.
So, in my head, in my view, developing countries have it right now a little bit better. They still sit down, together for meals and take time to have their meals, not in the middle of doing something. Is it that just my impression, or is it something that you've seen also?
Well, I think that used to be the case in many Western countries, and some let's say parents or some families are still very strict. The meals, or especially the dinners, should sort of be, they are very important, and they demand their children or the rest of the family that, no, this is us time or together time, and we will really enjoy this. And of course, if you force yourself to take time and eat and you have discussions and all the rest of it, I think that's a much healthier experience than, as you say, rushing across the street and eating on the go and just sort of inhaling the food instead of enjoying it and really tasting the different kinds of ingredients that you have in, tasting different kinds of vegetables or sauces and so on. As we see now, if we look, well, again, it's not a good thing to generalize too much, but if we look at Asian, large parts of Asia, they have a more collective culture. It's more common that you eat together, for instance, or you do things together, whereas in the Western world, it's more individualistic. And probably the clearest example is the United States, where everything is about you, or me. And for instance, China and many other Asian countries, it's more about the groups or your family and so on. And you tend, in my experience, to have longer dinners and dinners with more people in many of these countries. I also see that, and this sounds a little bit strange, but in a lot of countries where you don't have a lot of money or people don't have lots of money, they are actually much more welcoming in order to inviting you. And you would think, but hey, you don't have too much money. And you're still invited, and they might even slaughter their only chicken, their goat, in order to, you're a guest from a different country. And so you can't do that. That's awful. You're taking away your only chicken or your hen that's providing you with eggs every morning. And then suddenly you're killing it, and there will be no more eggs, as I experienced in Afghanistan, for instance. So I don't know. Having a lot of money, it's sort of, or having lots of access to food or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean that you want to enjoy it in the same way, or share it, or indulge in that experience where you sit down and enjoy something, have something together. Mm-hmm. So I think, very generally speaking, this is more common in Asia and let's say in large parts of Africa and the Middle East. They're so welcoming in many of these countries. They invite you to their home, and they sit around a lot of people. In Saudi Arabia, we hear a lot about Saudi Arabia and the way they treat women, allegedly. But if you go there, it's quite different. They're so welcoming. Me as a man will not be able to eat with women, so then it's separate. The women of a family have dinner together, and the men of a family have dinner together. If it's only the family, the husband and the wife and the children, they can all dine together. But the moment they introduce someone else, like me, a foreigner, or somebody else from a different family, a man, then they will split up. But hospitality is amazing. So there's some of the most hospitable countries in the world I've been to, Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia. And you're just like, wow. And lots of people in these countries don't have much, but they want to share what they have. And you are the guest. And, we're going to share what we have now. And then tomorrow we're going to have to worry about getting some more food, in order to share whatever they managed to get with whoever is available. Whoever is there, it's quite strange, and it's quite interesting to observe this,
Mm-hmm. I guess, as I mentioned at some point, food reflects who we are, what we value, our culture, and that's, that will reflect like how we greet guests, what we share, what we put on our table, and what we do at that table as a family or group of people. So that seems to be right.
Well, for sure. I totally agree, Angela. I agree with you there.
So I'll be mindful about your time. Don't want to hold you any longer. Thank you for sharing all these, stories and experiences and your view on the food world. Anything else you'd like to share? Maybe any thoughts? Maybe final food stories? Anything?
Well, we should not forget drinks, and I'm not necessarily talking about alcohol here, even though everybody thinks I do.
I love
but
my tea.
Tea is a great way of getting to know somebody. Sharing tea, sharing coffee. Or sharing alcoholic drinks, whether it's beer or wine. So that's also something we should not forget when talking about food. There are a lot of nutritious drinks out there, and again, it's also a good way of connecting to people. Over a cup of tea, for instance. So I always try. Most times when you eat, you also drink. So. Or lots of times when you drink, you don't eat, but that's also a good way of connecting and sitting there and just observing street life and sharing stories or getting to know stuff about the place you're in. Meeting locals for a coffee or the tea.
Yeah, recently actually, I was listening to this podcast on BBC Food World or something, and they were saying that food was probably a way, like, in the early times, sharing food, having all these meals where a lot of people would be present. It was a way to bond, to build social bonds. And they did this experiment somewhere, I forgot where they invited people to have lunch or dinner together. And then they were invited to take part in some negotiations or some debates. And there was another group of people who didn't have any food together. And so people who did have, lunch or dinner or some food experiences together, they were much more agreeable with each other. And they found, the solutions much, much faster than people who did not have this experience. So.
I think, in my experience, exactly the same thing. I mean, then you share something, and you share an experience, and I would definitely argue that having good food together or even bad food, it is for sure an experience. I would prefer good food, but still. And you share some tastes and you share having those tastes in one environment or another. And, you have stories around this food and so on. So, I believe in that research for sure. And I've seen a lot of that myself. You sort of, and you show that, hey, I'm no threat to you. I'm sitting down, I'm eating with you, and don't be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you. It can be one way of passing on such a message as well.
Yeah, I think so too. So thank you, Gunnar. Thank you for sharing these amazing stories, your amazing, journey and travels. And we all wish you, the best luck with your plans and future travels, so you can explore the world and then share it with us. Where can listeners follow you, find you, follow your work, follow your travels? What's the best way to connect with you?
Well, they can follow me on, I have a website, it's garfors.com. So just my last name, Garfors. And I have the same username on Twitter and, Facebook and Instagram. So for photos, I guess Instagram is the best, at Garfors on there. And Angela, thanks a lot for having me here. That was great fun talking to you.
Yeah, that was indeed. Thank you for this interview. I really enjoyed it. I'm always, curious to learn more about the world and especially the food in the world. So thank you for sharing.
My pleasure.
Thanks.